I was sleeping in my car behind a Walmart in Phoenix with my 5-year-old daughter when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. An attorney in Scottsdale, asking if I was Daniel Holloway's daughter, saying someone had been searching for me for over 20 years. Someone my father told me had been dead my entire life. I sat there in the dark, my daughter breathing softly in the backseat, and I knew that everything I believed about my family was about to fall apart. Before I continue with my story, it really helps to know that someone out there is listening. So if this is resonating with you in any way, or if it simply caught your attention, please let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, or just say hello. There's something incredibly comforting about knowing I'm not alone in this. Thanks a lot. Now, back to the story. My father kept a photograph of my mother on his desk for 31 years. Silver frame, positioned just so, always catching the light from his office window. In the picture, she's 23, standing in front of a fountain somewhere in Europe. Her hair is dark and wild from the wind, and she's laughing at something outside the frame. He'd look at it sometimes when I was in the room, this faraway expression on his face, and he'd say, "You have her eyes, Marin, that same fire." I was sitting across from that photograph the day I asked him for help. 1,500, I said, just to cover first and last month's rent somewhere smaller. Lily's school is. You're asking me for money. I'm asking you for a loan. I'll pay it back. He leaned back in his leather chair. My father was 62 then, still handsome in that way people called distinguished. Silver at his temples, a perpetual tan from golf, shirts pressed so sharp you could cut yourself on the creases. Daniel Holloway, the kind of man other men respected without quite knowing why. And where did the money go from your last job? I told you, the medical bills when Lily had pneumonia, the car repairs, because I seem to remember giving you $3,000 8 months ago. He hadn't given me anything. He'd bought Lily a winter coat and a pair of shoes, handed me $200 like it was a tip, and spent the rest of that visit lecturing me about financial responsibility. But he had a way of rewriting history so smoothly that sometimes I doubted my own memory. That went to the emergency room copay, I said, and groceries. Marin, he said my name the way you'd address a child who disappointed you. You're almost 30 years old. When are you going to learn to manage your life? The photograph of my mother watched me from its frame. I thought about what she would say if she could see us now, her daughter begging, her husband stone-faced across a mahogany desk. But she'd been dead since I was 7. I didn't really know what she would do. I only knew what my father had told me about her, and increasingly, I wondered how much of that was true either. I can manage my life, I said. I just need. You need to stop making excuses. You need to stop having children you can't afford. You need to. Lily is 5. She's in kindergarten. This isn't. Stop expecting other people to solve your problems. He turned back to his computer, already done with me. The answer is no. I sat there for another 30 seconds. Pride said to leave. Desperation said to keep pushing. In the end, desperation won, the way it always did when I thought about my daughter sleeping in a room that would soon belong to someone else. I'm going to be evicted, I said. On the 14th. They're not extending it again. Then you should have thought about that before you lost your job. I didn't lose it. The company folded. There was a lawsuit and There's always something, isn't there? He was typing now, not looking at me. Always some external factor, some bad luck, some circumstance beyond your control. Because sometimes there are circumstances beyond your control. Only for people who don't plan. I wanted to ask him how I was supposed to plan for Lily's father leaving before she was born. How I was supposed to plan for a global hiring freeze in my industry. How I was supposed to plan for a company owned by embezzlers who didn't tell anyone they were embezzlers until the FBI showed up. But I knew how that conversation would go. Everything was a character flaw. Everything was my fault. I'd spent my whole life hearing variations of this lecture, and I'd spent my whole life half believing it, because he said it with such confidence that maybe he was right. Maybe I was just bad at living. Maybe I was broken in some fundamental way that other people weren't. Okay, I said. I stood up. Thanks for your time. He didn't look up from his computer. I walked out through the living room, where his wife Denise was watching television with the volume low. She glanced at me, her expression carefully neutral. We didn't talk much. She'd married my father when I was 19, after a series of girlfriends I'd been encouraged to call friends. She was polite in that practiced way of people who know they're meant to tolerate you but not embrace you. "Leaving?" she asked. "Yeah." "Drive safe." Lily was in the car. I'd left the engine running for the air conditioning. It was early September in Mesa, and the heat was still brutal, and she was watching something on my phone, her legs swinging under the dashboard. She had my dark hair and my mother's eyes, according to my father. I never knew if that was true. I didn't have any pictures of my mother except the ones my father chose to display. "Are we going to Grandpa's house?" she asked when I got in. "No, baby. We were just stopping by." "Oh," she went back to her screen. She never seemed disappointed about leaving my father's house. Even at 5, she'd picked up on something about the way he looked at her, not cold exactly, but distant. Like she was a math problem he didn't want to solve. I pulled out of the driveway and drove toward the apartment complex where we'd lived for 18 months and would live for 10 more days, unless something changed. Nothing changed. The eviction process is more bureaucratic than dramatic. There's paperwork, court dates, a man who comes to your door and hands you documents while your daughter watches from the hallway and asks if you're in trouble. You have a certain number of days to vacate, and then the lock gets changed, and anything left inside becomes the landlord's problem. I spent those 10 days calling everyone I could think of. My friend Rachel from college offered me her couch, but she lived in Portland with 2 roommates and a cat I was allergic to, and it wasn't a solution so much as a delay. My former coworker Marcus said he wished he could help, but he was barely making rent himself. The women's shelters in Phoenix had waiting lists. The emergency housing programs had funding gaps. I called my father twice more. He didn't answer either time. The night before we had to be out, I sat on the floor of our empty apartment, furniture sold, boxes stacked by the door waiting for a storage unit I couldn't afford, and looked at my daughter sleeping on an air mattress in the corner. The carpet had square indentations where the couch used to be. The walls still had nail holes from the pictures I'd taken down. I thought about my mother. I was 7 when she died. Car accident, my father said, hit by a drunk driver on her way home from somewhere. He never liked to talk about it, never liked to talk about her family either. Her parents were dead, he told me, her mother when she was young, her father before I was born. No siblings, no aunts or uncles worth knowing. We were alone, just the 2 of us, and that was why we had to stick together. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my father. He had the photographs and the stories and the grief in his eyes when he looked at her silver-framed face. I had no one to contradict him, no one to say that anything he told me was a lie. The next morning, I loaded what fit into my car. Clothes, Lily's toys, toiletries, the good pots and pans, the documents I thought I might need. The rest went to donation or stayed for the landlord to deal with. I strapped my daughter into her car seat and drove to a parking lot behind a big box store on the east side of the city, because I'd read somewhere that they didn't always call the police on people sleeping in their cars. It was temporary. That's what I told myself. Everything is temporary. The first week wasn't as bad as I expected. We had a rhythm. I'd park at night in a different lot each time, behind a supermarket, near a 24-hour gym, in the corner of a hospital parking garage where other people were sleeping in their vehicles too. Lily thought it was an adventure at first. Camping, she called it. I let her believe that. I found a church that offered free breakfast 3 mornings a week and showers every afternoon for people who needed them. I applied for jobs from my phone, using the library's Wi-Fi, changed into clean clothes in gas station bathrooms, braided my daughter's hair in the backseat while she watched cartoons. Nobody tells you how expensive poverty is. Laundromat quarters, storage unit fees, gas for driving in circles so you don't have to explain why you're parked anywhere too long, food that doesn't need refrigeration. I burned through what little savings I had left faster than I expected. "Mama," Lily asked one night, "why do we sleep in the car now?" "Because we're between houses, like I told you." When will we get the new house? Soon, baby. Is it going to have a bathtub? Yes. I want a bathtub. I know. She fell asleep holding her stuffed rabbit, the one with the torn ear I'd sewn back 3 times. I watched her breathe and thought about all the ways I'd failed her, all the choices I'd made that led here. Maybe my father was right. Maybe I was just bad at living. Around 10 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Maren Holloway? I hesitated. Scams were common. Bill collectors too, but something made me respond. Who is this? My name is Thomas Reed. I'm an attorney based in Scottsdale. I'm trying to reach the daughter of Daniel Holloway. Why? I represent a client who's been searching for you. He'd very much like to meet. Please call me when you can. I stared at the message for a long time. The next morning, I dropped Lily at the church's temporary childcare program. They let you leave your kids for up to 4 hours while you looked for work, and drove to a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi. My phone battery was at 12%. I plugged it in and sat in the corner by an outlet and called the number. A man answered on the second ring. Professional voice, calm, measured. Thomas Reed. This is Maren Holloway. You texted me last night. Ms. Holloway, thank you for calling. He didn't sound surprised. My client has been looking for you for some time. He'd like to arrange a meeting if you're willing. Who is your client? I think it would be better if he explained the situation himself. That's not really an answer. A pause. His name is Walter Prescott. The name meant nothing to me. I said so. Another pause, longer this time. Ms. Holloway, may I ask, what do you know about your mother's family? My mother's family is dead. Her parents died before I was born. Silence on the line. I could hear him breathing, deciding something. Ms. Holloway, he said finally, Walter Prescott is your grandfather, your mother's father. He's very much alive, and he's been trying to find you for over 20 years. I almost laughed. That's how absurd it sounded. My mother's father alive. Searching for me? My father had shown me the obituaries. He'd told me stories about the funeral he attended alone because I was too young to travel. He'd grieved them in front of me, talked about how my mother was an orphan by her mid-20s, how it broke her heart to have no extended family for me to know. That's not possible, I said. I understand why you might think that, but I assure you it is possible and it's true. Mr. Prescott would very much like to meet you in person, to explain everything. Explain what? I'm not the right person to tell you that story, but he asked me to say. He stopped, started again. He asked me to tell you that he never stopped looking, that he hired investigators, that your father moved you 11 times in 8 years, and every time Mr. Prescott got close, you were gone again. 11 times. It was such a specific number. And it was true. I counted them once, all the cities and towns and rental houses we'd cycled through when I was young. Fresno to Tucson to Albuquerque to some town in Nevada I barely remembered. My father always said it was for work. New opportunities, better chances. By the time I was 15, we'd settled in Arizona, and I assumed the moving was done. I don't understand, I said. Neither do I entirely, but Mr. Prescott does. Will you meet him? I should have said no. I should have asked more questions. I should have done background research and verified credentials and protected myself the way I'd learned to protect myself from every unexpected offer. But I was sleeping in my car behind a supermarket with my 5-year-old daughter, and a man was telling me I had family I never knew about, and my father had lied to me so many times about so many things that one more lie didn't seem impossible. Where? I asked. Thomas Reed's office was in a building that looked like a resort. Spanish tiles, courtyard fountain, palm trees bent gracefully over a parking lot full of vehicles that cost more than I'd ever earned in a year. I left Lily with the church childcare for the second time that day, drove to Scottsdale, and sat in my dented Honda Civic for 10 minutes with the engine off, sweating through my least-wrinkled blouse. The receptionist led me to a conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows, a table that could seat 12, and 2 men waiting, one in his 40s, gray suit, clearly the lawyer. The other was older. 70 at least, maybe more, white hair, thinning but well-groomed, a face that reminded me of someone I couldn't quite place. He stood when I walked in. "Marin," he said. Just my name, nothing else. But the way he said it, like a prayer, like something he'd been waiting to say for decades, made me stop in the doorway. "You look so much like your mother." I didn't move. "I'm Walter," he said. "Your grandmother was Catherine. She died when your mother was 13. Your mother's name was Catherine Cathy. Everyone called her Cathy. She had a birthmark on her left shoulder shaped like a crescent moon. She was allergic to strawberries. She wanted to be a marine biologist when she was young, but then she changed her mind and studied art history. She met your father at a gallery opening in San Francisco. She was 20 years old." He was still standing. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. "She was my only child," he said, "and you are her only child, and I have been looking for you since you were 7 years old." I sat down because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. Thomas Reed slid a folder across the table. Photographs, documents, a birth certificate, mine with my mother's name on it, Catherine Ann Prescott, not Holloway, Prescott, and below that another name I'd never seen before. Father, Daniel James Holloway. Mother, Catherine Ann Prescott. Maternal grandfather, Walter Eugene Prescott. "I don't understand," I said. "He told me you were dead, both of you. He showed me he had." "He lied," Walter said. "He lied about everything." The story came out in pieces over the next hour. My mother had married my father against Walter's wishes. He thought Daniel was charming but hollow, a man who borrowed money he didn't repay, who changed jobs every few months, who told different stories to different people about where he came from and what he wanted. But Cathy loved him. She believed in him. She got pregnant at 22 and married him anyway. Walter had money, real money, the kind that came from 3 generations of real estate investment and careful management. When I was born, he set up a trust in my name. $25,000 to start with annual contributions. A college fund, a safety net, a future. My father was named trustee. Cathy was too busy with me, Walter explained, and Daniel said he understood finances, and it seemed like a way to bring him into the family properly. A gesture of faith. Cathy died when I was 7, not in a car accident, not killed by a drunk driver on her way home from somewhere. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when I was 6 and gone 18 months later. My father didn't tell me the truth about how she died, either. "I wanted custody," Walter said. "I tried, he fought me, said I was trying to steal his daughter, said I'd turned Cathy against him while she was alive. The court sided with him. He was the surviving parent and I was just a grandfather. But I insisted on visitation. I had lawyers, I had documents." "I don't remember you," I said. "I don't remember any of this." "You were so young, and after the first year he stopped bringing you, started moving, changed your school, changed your address, changed his phone number. I hired a private investigator, but every time we found you, he was already gone again. He said it was for work. He said many things. Most of them weren't true." I looked at the folder on the table. Photographs of my mother I'd never seen, not just the one from the fountain, but others. Her at a beach. Her in what looked like a college dorm. Her holding me as an infant, looking down at my face with an expression I couldn't name. "Why?" I asked. "Why would he do this?" Walter's face changed. Something hard and sad moved across it. "Because he didn't want you to find out what he'd done." He reached across the table and opened the folder to a different section. Bank statements, account records, transfer documents. "The trust I set up for you," he said. "Your father had access as trustee. Over 18 years he withdrew every cent. $2.4 million, gone." I didn't understand the numbers at first. They were too large, too abstract. I saw the columns and the dates and the signatures, but they didn't connect to anything in my real life, to the eviction notice, to the storage unit I couldn't afford, to my daughter sleeping in a car seat because her mother couldn't provide a bed. I was supposed to have. You were supposed to be secure. You were supposed to have options. College, a house, freedom to pursue whatever you wanted. Walter's voice cracked. Instead, he took it all. And when I confronted him about it, when I showed him the evidence and told him I was going to the police, he disappeared. Took you out of state. Changed your last name on your school records. Told you I was dead so you'd never come looking. I thought about all the years I'd spent believing I was alone. All the times I'd wondered why we had no family. All the times my father had stood in front of that photograph and said I had my mother's eyes and never once mentioned that I also had a grandfather who was still alive. Still looking. Still waiting. Why didn't you go to the police anyway? I asked. He threatened to say I'd abused you, that I was the reason you had to be kept hidden. Walter's hands were shaking again. I didn't have proof that I hadn't. I didn't have access to you. I didn't know where you were. My lawyer said that if I pushed too hard, he could use the accusations to get a restraining order, to make sure I never found you at all. So you just stopped. No, I never stopped, but I had to be careful. I had to wait. I kept hiring investigators, kept looking. Last month, one of them found your name in an eviction filing in Maricopa County. I had Thomas contact you immediately. Eviction filing, public record, anyone could access it. That's how he found me. Not luck, not fate. My own failure, my own humiliation, documented for anyone to see. I didn't know you were living in a car, Walter said. I didn't know how bad it had gotten, if I'd found you sooner. You couldn't have known. I should have tried harder. I should have. I'm here now, I said. That's what matters. But it wasn't all that mattered. Not really. There was still a folder full of bank statements on the table. Still a lifetime of lies I was only beginning to understand. Still my father, somewhere in this city, probably watching television with Denise, completely unaware that everything he'd built was about to collapse. What happens now? I asked. Walter looked at Thomas. Thomas opened his briefcase and pulled out a different folder. Now, Thomas said, we rebuild what was taken, and then we ensure your father faces the consequences of what he did. I didn't go back to the car that night. Walter insisted we come to his house, a sprawling single-story in North Scottsdale with views of the mountains and a guest suite bigger than any apartment I'd ever rented. Lily was confused but delighted. She'd never seen a swimming pool that belonged to one person before. She'd never had her own bathroom with a tub deep enough to swim in. Is this man your daddy? She asked me when I put her to bed. No, he's your great-grandfather. What's that? He's my mommy's daddy, my grandfather. But Grandpa is your daddy. I know, it's confusing. I'll explain more tomorrow. She accepted this the way children accept everything, with faith and flexibility and a willingness to let the adults figure out the complicated parts. I kissed her forehead and watched her fall asleep in clean sheets, in a room that smelled like lavender, in a house where someone actually wanted us. Then I went downstairs and sat with Walter in his study. The room was full of books, old ones, leather-bound, arranged by color on floor-to-ceiling shelves, a desk in the corner, a leather sofa, and photographs, not of my mother, but of me, school pictures I didn't remember taking, a newspaper clipping from a spelling bee I won in 3rd grade, a printout from my college graduation that must have come from someone's social media. You kept track of me, I said. When I could, there were gaps, years where I couldn't find anything, but I saved what I found. I picked up one of the photos, me at maybe 12, standing in front of a Christmas tree. I remembered that tree. We were living in Tucson then. My father had told me we couldn't afford decorations, so I'd made ornaments out of paper and string, and he'd complained that they looked cheap. What was she like? I asked. My mother, really. Walter was quiet for a moment. Stubborn, he said. Idealistic. She believed in people even when they'd given her every reason not to. She saw your father's potential when everyone else saw his flaws. Maybe that was her gift. Maybe it was her tragedy. I never knew which. Did she love him? I think she did, in the beginning. But by the end, when she was sick, I think she understood what he was. I think she tried to tell me something, but she was so weak, and he was always there, and he trailed off. I don't know what she tried to say. I'll never know. I looked at the photograph of 12-year-old me, with her paper ornaments. He let me struggle, I said. He watched me lose my apartment. He watched me ask him for help. He said no. He told me it was my own fault. And the whole time, he had your money, or what was left of it. He'd spent most of it by the time you were 20, but he kept withdrawing whatever interest accumulated, even after you were an adult, even after he should have handed control over to you. Why didn't the bank stop him? Because he was the trustee. Because the trust was structured in a way that gave him almost unlimited access until you turned 35, and even then, there were clauses he could have used to delay. I didn't know. I didn't realize how much power I'd given him when I set it up. I trusted my own lawyers, and they trusted the paperwork, and by the time anyone understood what was happening, he was already running. I put the photograph down. I want to see him, I said. Maren, I need to see him. I need to look at him and know that he knows I know. Walter studied my face for a long moment. Then he nodded. Thomas is filing the lawsuit tomorrow. Civil action for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and theft. Your father will be served at his home address by end of week. If you want to be there when it happens, we can arrange that. I want to be there before. Before he knows what's coming. I want to talk to him one more time while he still thinks he's gotten away with it. Walter frowned. That might not be wise if he suspects. He won't. He thinks I'm too beaten down to question anything. He thinks I still believe every lie he ever told me. I leaned forward. He needs to know that I figured it out myself, not from a lawsuit, not from a lawyer. He needs to know that he underestimated me. For a moment, Walter just looked at me. Then something shifted in his expression, recognition, maybe, or pride. You really are like your mother, he said. She wouldn't have let it go either. The next 3 days were a blur of paperwork and preparation. Thomas Reed rebuilt the trust with Walter's money, a new account in my name, structured so that no one but me could touch it. Walter deposited enough to match what had been stolen, plus interest. When I saw the number on the first statement, I had to sit down. This is too much, I said. It's what you were owed. But you don't have to. Maren, Walter put his hand over mine. I missed your entire childhood. I missed your graduation. I missed your daughter's birth. I missed 24 years of your life because a man decided his greed was more important than your future. This is the least I can do. I didn't know how to respond to that. I'd spent so long expecting nothing from anyone that receiving something, receiving everything, felt like standing on ground that might give way at any moment. But I took the money, because it was mine, because it had always been mine, and because I had a daughter who deserved a bathtub and a bedroom and a school she wouldn't have to leave at the end of the month. On the 4th day, I drove to my father's house. He opened the door himself. Denise was out. I'd checked her social media first, seen the photos from her friend's brunch, and his car was the only one in the driveway. He looked surprised to see me, but not alarmed. Just vaguely inconvenienced, the way he always looked when I showed up without calling first. Maren, I wasn't expecting. Can I come in? He hesitated. I watched his face cycle through options, how to say no without looking like he was saying no. But I was already stepping past him, walking through the foyer into the living room, sitting down on the couch like I belonged there. He followed me, stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I'm a little busy today. This won't take long. What do you want? I looked around the room. Expensive furniture, new television, artwork on the walls that Denise had picked out but my father had paid for, with what money I used to wonder. He worked in consulting, he always said, corporate strategy. It had never been clear what that actually meant. I wanted to apologize, I said. His expression shifted, curiosity now mixed with suspicion. Apologize for what? For the way I talked to you last week when I asked for help. I folded my hands in my lap. You were right. It wasn't your responsibility. I need to take ownership of my own life. Well, he uncrossed his arms, moved further into the room. That's mature of you. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about my pattern of making excuses. Have you? Yes, and I realized I never really asked you about your life, about how you made it work. You raised me alone after Mom died. You managed everything. I never appreciated how hard that must have been. He sat down across from me, still wary but warming. He'd always been susceptible to flattery, always needed to be seen as capable, competent, the man who had answers other people lacked. It wasn't easy, he said. Your mother's death, it changed everything. I don't remember much about that time. I was so young. You were too young to understand. Can you tell me about it? About what happened after? He leaned back. His gaze went to the photograph on the desk, still there, still positioned to catch the light. We had nothing, he said. Your mother came from money, but her father cut us off after she died. Said I wasn't fit to raise you, tried to take you away from me. Can you imagine? Your own grandfather trying to steal you from your father. He tried to take me. He hired lawyers, investigators, followed us everywhere we went. That's why we moved so much when you were little. I was trying to protect you from him. Protect me from what? From being taken away from your only parent, from being raised by a stranger who thought money gave him the right to control everything. His voice had an edge now, old anger, surfacing. Walter Prescott was a cold man, obsessed with power. He never liked me. He thought I wasn't good enough for his daughter, and he spent years trying to prove it. What happened to him? He died, few years after your mother. Heart attack, I think, good riddance. I watched his face as he said it. Watched him lie to me with the same casual confidence he'd used all my life. He believed I would never question him. He believed I would absorb this story the way I'd absorbed all the others, as truth, as history, as the way things simply were. That's sad, I said, that you never got to reconcile with him. There was nothing to reconcile. He was a bad man. The world is better without people like that. You're probably right. He smiled, just slightly, the smile of a man who thought he'd won. Where's Lily? He asked. You didn't bring her. She's with a friend. You look different, rested. I've been sleeping better. Good, that's good. He glanced at his watch. Was there anything else? I do have a call in half an hour. Just one thing. I reached into my bag. I wanted to show you something. I pulled out the folder Thomas had given me. The bank statements, the transfer records, the trust documents with my name on them and my father's signature on every withdrawal. I set it on the coffee table between us. What is this? He asked. Open it. He picked it up, opened the cover. I watched his face as he processed what he was seeing. It happened slowly. First confusion, the expression of a man looking at something that shouldn't exist. Then recognition. Then, finally, fear. Where did you get this? From my grandfather. Your grandfather is dead. No, he isn't. He's alive. He found me last week. He told me everything. My father's face went gray. He set the folder down like it was poisonous. Marin, whatever he told you. He told me you stole $2.4 million from a trust fund set up for me when I was born. He showed me the records. Your signature is on every withdrawal. That's a misunderstanding. He told me you took me and ran when he tried to confront you. That you moved 11 times in 8 years to keep him from finding me. That you told me he was dead so I'd never go looking. He's lying. He's a manipulative, controlling. He has the documents. I've seen them. Documents can be faked. He's rich. He can afford. He has photographs of me from every year of my childhood. School pictures, newspaper clippings, everything he could find while you were hiding me from him. My father stood up. He was breathing hard now, his composure cracking. You don't understand what he's like, what he did to your mother. He destroyed her. My mother died of cancer, not in a car accident. You lied about that too. I was protecting you. From what? From knowing the truth, from having a family. From him, he was shouting now. The smooth, controlled father I'd known all my life was gone. In his place was someone I almost didn't recognize, red-faced, desperate, small. He was going to take you from me. He thought his money gave him the right to my daughter. I was never your daughter. I was your investment. I was the key to keeping the trust money flowing. That's not true. Then why did you keep withdrawing from the account after I turned 18? After I was a legal adult? I should have had access to that money myself. Instead, you kept taking it. While I worked 2 jobs through college. While I lived in apartments with mold in the walls. While I begged you for help and you told me I should learn to manage my life. He didn't have an answer for that. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I came here to give you a chance, I said. To look you in the eye and tell you that I know, that I see you now, that the version of my father I believed in my whole life never existed. Maren. Don't, I stood up. Don't say my name like you care about me. You never cared about me. You cared about what I was worth. I raised you. I fed you. I kept you safe. You kept me ignorant. There's a difference. I walked toward the door. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there in his expensive living room, surrounded by furniture paid for with my stolen future, looking like a man who'd finally run out of lies. At the door, I turned back. A process server will be here tomorrow. My grandfather is suing you for fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. His lawyers think the criminal charges will follow once the civil case establishes the evidence. You can't do this. I'm not doing anything. I'm just watching the consequences arrive. I walked out. I didn't look back. The lawsuit became public record within a week. Thomas Reed had warned me it would draw attention. A multi-million-dollar family fraud case in Scottsdale, involving a man who'd spent decades posing as a respectable consultant while secretly draining his dead wife's family fortune. That was the kind of story local news loved. My father's name was in the papers within 10 days. Not front page, but prominent enough. Old colleagues called to ask if it was true. Golf buddies stopped returning his calls. Denise, who'd apparently known nothing about any of it, hired her own lawyer. I learned most of this through Thomas, who got updates from investigators monitoring the case. I didn't talk to my father again. I didn't need to. The last conversation had been enough. What surprised me was how quickly everything unraveled. My father had always seemed so solid, so untouchable. The man who had answers. The man who knew how the world worked. But the moment his secrets became public, the structure that had held his life together started to crack. Denise filed for divorce 3 weeks after the lawsuit was served. She'd signed a prenup, but she was contesting it now, claiming fraud in the inducement, that she'd married a man who'd lied about his finances, his history, his character. The house they'd shared was suddenly in dispute. So were the bank accounts. So was everything else. I didn't follow the details closely. I didn't need to. I had a daughter to take care of, and a life to rebuild, and a grandfather who wanted to spend time with his great-granddaughter before she started kindergarten in the fall. Walter enrolled Lily in a private school near his house. Offered to buy me a condo in the same neighborhood. When I hesitated, when I said it felt like too much, too fast, he just looked at me with those eyes I'd seen in the mirror my whole life and said, "Let me help, please. I've been waiting 24 years to help." I said yes. Not because I needed to be rescued, but because he was family. Real family, the kind that shows up, the kind that fights for you, the kind that never stops looking even when you don't know they exist. On the day we moved into the condo, I found a box waiting on the doorstep. No return address, just my name, printed in careful block letters. Inside were photographs. My mother from before I was born, before she met my father, laughing on a beach, standing in front of a sunset, holding a camera in one hand and squinting against the light. And beneath the photographs, a letter. Not from Walter, from someone else, someone I didn't recognize. Maren. Your grandfather told me you might want these. I was your mother's roommate in college. We lost touch after she married Daniel, but I always wondered what happened to her. To you. I saved everything I could. She was my best friend. Call me if you ever want to talk. Lydia. A phone number at the bottom. I held the letter for a long time. Then I picked up my phone, walked out onto the balcony where Lily was watching the sunset, and dialed. The criminal charges came 6 months later. By then, I'd settled into a routine. Lily in school, me taking classes online to finish a degree I'd abandoned years ago, dinners with Walter on Sundays where he told me stories about my mother, and I told him stories about the years we'd missed. Lydia came to visit once, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and a laugh that reminded me of photographs I'd only just learned existed. She'd known my mother better than anyone, better than my father ever had. He was charming, Lydia said. When they first met, Kathy was convinced he was misunderstood, that everyone else saw him wrong. Did you? I saw someone who always took more than he gave, but I was young too. I thought love could change people. I thought about all the years I'd spent believing my father's version of the world. All the times I'd doubted myself because he seemed so certain and I was always so unsure. She would have left him, Lydia said. I'm sure of it, if she'd lived long enough to see clearly. She would have taken you and gone home to Walter and never looked back. But she didn't live long enough. No, she didn't. The criminal charges were for felony theft and fraud. My father's attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor wasn't interested. Too much evidence, too many years, too much money. The trial was scheduled for late spring. Walter offered to come with me. So did Lydia. So did Thomas Reed, who had become something like a friend over the months of paperwork and depositions and court filings. I said no. I didn't need witnesses. I didn't need support. I needed to sit in that courtroom and watch my father face the consequences of his own choices, alone, the same way I'd faced so many things alone because of him. The trial lasted 4 days. I only went to the last one. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights, a gallery that could seat maybe 50 people, half filled with reporters and curious spectators, and a handful of people I didn't recognize. My father was at the defendant's table. He looked older than I remembered, thinner. His suit didn't fit the way his suits used to fit, and his hair had gone entirely gray in the months since I'd seen him last. He saw me when I walked in. I watched his face change, hope briefly, and then something else. Not shame. My father didn't feel shame, something more like resignation. I sat in the back row. I didn't say anything. I just watched. The prosecutor gave a closing argument that lasted 20 minutes. She walked through the timeline, the trust fund, the withdrawals, the flight from state to state, the decades of lies. She showed the bank statements on a projector. She showed photographs of the life I'd been denied while my father spent my inheritance. My father's attorney argued that he'd been a devoted single parent, that the money had been used for my care, that there was no criminal intent, only desperation. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 6 hours. I stayed in a coffee shop down the street, checking my phone every few minutes until Thomas texted me the verdict. Guilty on all counts. I walked back to the courthouse. By the time I arrived, my father was being led out in handcuffs. He passed within 10 feet of me on his way to the holding area. Our eyes met. I expected something, a plea, an apology, an attempt at manipulation one last time. Instead, he just looked at me. His face was blank, unreadable, like he'd finally run out of masks to wear. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. Sentencing was 3 months later, 8 years. He'd be eligible for parole in 5, assuming good behavior. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. I didn't need to. I'd already seen what I needed to see. On the day the sentence was handed down, I was at Walter's house. Lily was in the backyard, running through sprinklers, shrieking every time the cold water hit her. Walter was sitting on the patio with a glass of iced tea, watching her like a man who just remembered what joy looked like. "Are you all right?" he asked. I thought about it, really thought about it. "I don't know," I said. "I think I will be." "That's enough for now." Lily ran up to us, dripping wet, holding a dandelion she'd picked from a crack in the concrete. "Mama, look, I found a flower." "That's beautiful, baby." "Can I keep it?" "You can try, but dandelions don't like being picked. They go to sleep pretty fast after." She considered this. Then she held the flower up to the sunlight, watching the seeds drift loose in the breeze. "Then I'll let it go," she said, "so it can make more flowers somewhere else." She blew the remaining seeds into the wind. They scattered across the yard, catching the light as they fell. Walter reached over and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. The sun was warm. My daughter was laughing. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, the ground beneath me felt solid. Lily ran back toward the sprinklers, and I watched her go.